Okay. Take it away. Hey, we're here today with Chris Yates and Keith Arem, and we're going to be talking about Frost Road, which is sort of the impression I'm getting, it's a multimedia project that involves comics and involves video games and possibly involves film, right?
It's fair, yeah.
Stop me if I'm going in the wrong direction at any way, but sounds like a really ambitious project that you guys are putting together right now.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
okay, Keith, why don't you start, and then we'll see where we go.
Frost Road it's been an interesting and long journey for us in a great way. It was created as a screenplay for a film that I was going to direct before COVID. And I had been working on several graphic novels and other projects. I mainly work in the video game industry. Most people know me for talent and performance direction in a lot of AAA video games.
Have you worked on any big video games?
Just a couple of little ones like Call of Duty and stuff to flex a little bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we're my company PCB. We're here in Los Angeles, and we've got 5 recording studios, and we focus on mainly AAA performance capture. So things like the new Yakuza series, Persona, Titanfall, Ghost Recon, Rainbow Six, games like that, and as a result, we get to work with amazing writers, amazing celebrities, fantastic teams, and every time we're on stage directing mocap shoots or voiceover or something else like that, the actors are always asking, when am I going off and doing my own projects? And so over the years, I realized that storyboarding and graphic novels and comic books were kind of in the blood of sort of visualizing these projects. Mm-hmm. And my first book that I did was a book called Ascend with Christopher Schei, and we published it on Image Comics, and it became like the #1 selling book for Image when it came out. And it launched a lot of opportunities in film and television, and really took my career not only in games, but now into sort of not just multimedia, but getting into the film side of things. But the problem was with the scope of a story like Ascend, and if you've seen it, it's this giant angels and demons fighting the purgatory wars and harvesting souls. It's just not a cheap movie to make. So I started creating smaller graphic novels as an opportunity to allow me to get in as a director, to start to work as a film director. And so as a result, that's where Frost Road really got its traction. It was a smaller budget film, had a number of my friends attached as celebrities to star in the film. And between a tragic fire that we had and then COVID, it just wasn't in the cards to get it. And the film industry moves at a different pace than video games does. So over the past several years, we kind of used the storyboards to inspire the graphic novel. I reconnected with Christopher Schei. We've been working on a number of projects together, and it sort of evolved organically as this really beautiful graphic novel. So during COVID, we finished it. And even though it was designed as a motion picture script, as a graphic novel, it plays wonderfully as this psychological thriller. And so when I was introduced to Chris earlier this year, Chris had been working at the publisher we were working with on our last graphic novel, the Exiled, and that was a great experience. And Chris had been working on marketing and distribution. He's a writer as well, and really bonded, over our creative and I think aspirational sort of goals for this property. And we decided to launch it as a Kickstarter this year. And we just wrapped up the campaign a few weeks ago, and now we're off to the races. So I think as a graphic novel, it's starting to really resonate with the audience, but hopefully we'll follow this path of doing video games and motion pictures with the same story.
So basically, you figured you conquered video games, so why not try to conquer graphic novels now? We get it. We understand the goals. You conquer one thing. You can't sleep. You got to go and conquer something else.
My wife calls me a shark because if I'll stop swimming, I'll die. So I have to constantly just find something that's keeping me going. But as Chris can attest, we have so many things that we're working on concurrently. So this has been a really great experience to kind of branch off from being sort of like the director for hire working on these games into our own original content, and letting the audience now have direct access to us, and us being able to participate in the projects we work on. Because I love all the games we get to do, but you're kind of brought in as the gun for hire to do this work and do things. And as a result, we get exposed to some of the best projects in the industry and the best talent. But longevity wise, you're on to the next project, the way commercial directors and other people work. So this was really a chance for us to meet and communicate and collaborate with our audience and build a community around the work that we're doing.
So with Frost Road, it was Kickstarted, so you're publishing that yourself, right?
Yeah.
So ultimately, is your goal to have some type of comic publishing company where you can just publish your own stuff whenever you want?
That's a really kind of, I've always felt, just looking at the business side of things and being a creator and seeing other creators forced to go in different directions because the distribution models were kind of broken, as we're seeing, what's happening with Diamond, other things. It's just very broken for the creator. And yet the creator is the one who's building the IP and doing all this work. So coming from the game industry, I kind of feel that, obviously, if you look at distribution, the way it works and the way that games are distributed, it's very different than film or television or graphic novels. Mm-hmm. So what we're working on behind the scenes, and something that you're going to see a little bit later from us later this year and next year, is using our background in video games, especially video game engines, and combining that with our love of comics and graphic novels and being able to use that as a platform. And so that's really something we think is going to be the future of where we're going, and it's going to be a good journey for us.
And Chris, your input in all this is you're sort of on the publishing side of things, if I'm understanding this correctly.
Yeah. So as Keith alluded to, we met earlier this year. And I'm kind of the director of special projects and outreach. And what does that actually mean is, like, I kind of help shepherd these projects along, and using my kind of expertise I've gathered along the way, because I used to work for the Walt Disney Company, United Talent Agency, and for Massive Publishing. And so basically I kind of just use all of those things. And when I first met Keith and he was telling me kind of all these things he just told you guys, was like, man, like, we need to figure this out. Like, why haven't you done that? And he was like, I don't really have the time. I don't really know anyone, just kind of like, I'm so busy. I kind of just don't have the time. Well, I'm like, well, I'll help you out. And so we very quickly, before even Keith offered me the job, so to speak, it was just kind of like, oh, I'm going to, just start looping you into the right people. And so we started talking to Kickstarter directly, and then it just me kind of just start reaching out to all the people I knew through my contacts at Massive and through Disney, and just kind of like, hey, I have my friend Keith, and he has this thing. And so we just kind of just like, let's kind of just give this a shot. Like, let's just go for it. Like, as he said, Frost Road's been done for a while, and I know you're really excited about it. It's this big, beautiful coffee-sized hardcover with an acrylic slipcase. Like, oh, cool. Why don't we just give it a shot and see what we can do? And let's see what resonates, what doesn't. Because Keith, as he said, it was kind of done. He kind of knew the beginning, middle, and end. And so when I came up, we're like, what are some things we can do? And he's like, well, you have PCB, and it's like you're a resource, a treasure trove, if you will, of information and connections. And it's like, well, Keith also has a school called Are You Game, where he basically teaches mocap and acting for voiceover work and things like that. Well, it's like, well, why don't we potentially offer that as rewards? And so with all the things Keith has learned, and through his contacts with Christopher Schei and Trevor Goring, who did this, the storyboarding, and kind of just everyone in the process, it's like, hey, how do we give back to people who either want to learn, start, or just want to just be a part of it? So it's kind of this, I think it was today or recently, Robert Rodriguez launched the Brass Knuckle campaign on some like crowdfunding. It's basically like, hey, we have all this resources and we want to give back to the community. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, okay, how do we learn from that and move on? And so that's a very long-winded answer of saying, like, basically we're taking these IPs that Keith has made and just saying, like, hey, we love graphic novels and we love the medium, the community of it. Like, how do we offer something different? Because, unless it's an event or a reboot or, some kind of polybagged, gimmick, which we all love, but it's like, like, unless there's something like that, it's kind of hard to cut through the noise. So, it's why don't we try to just do it ourselves and see what we can think of? And we've been very fortunate that there's been a good response. We were able to fund our goal. We kickstarted for 20 grand. We reached over 24 grand, and we're going to be doing late pledges, so if people are still interested, they can still check it out. But it's just like, okay, here's the first one. We kind of put our flag in the sand, so to speak. Now, how do we just make it better? And as Keith said, with everything in the video game community and what we're learning from is like the next one we announce in the summer is going to be completely different. And we're going to take all those lessons learned and apply it for that one.
Right.
Okay. And to that point, like, Kickstarter has been an amazing ally with us because, like, I think a lot of the community who has backed Kickstarters before kind of knows the rhythm of how a campaign goes, what the artists are. They're known commodities, and there's some amazing teams that are just using Kickstarter as their only platform. And as distribution is changing right now, at least on the physical side, if you want to have a really high quality coffee table book, it's hard for everyone necessarily to get out to their local comic store. Or, Barnes and Noble and Borders are not really as a thing anymore. So
yeah.
If you have a love of having a physical book, that's something that's going to be a challenge. So Kickstarter has been a great outlet for us because now we can do this very high quality storytelling and artwork and packaging, and then find our community.
Yeah, I've noticed there's been a trend recently with graphic novels that are coming out that they in themselves are a sort of work of art, like the book itself. Yeah. It's not just a paperback, version of a comic. There are these beautiful presentations, Alan Moore was one of the people who pushed for that and a lot of stuff. Like, if you look at Lost Girls or you look at the Bumper Book of Magic that they put out, they're these beautiful, huge, wonderfully put together books. It's a great thing. I really think it's a new thing for collectors to be interested in, is this sort of beautiful presentation of something, And like you said, it's another thing that helps cut through the noise, because that's really the hardest part, I think, of getting something out there. And
they also have direct access to the creator.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's I think the most unique part. Like, I realized when I was doing Ascend with Image was that, we sold out worldwide in like 4 days, and then that was it. And we're like, well, why aren't we still releasing more books? And like, well, we got to resolicit. We got to go back to Diamond. It's going to take 6 months. And, and like, but if people are buying the books and it's gone, then let's keep printing. And so that was what brought us to Comic-Con 20 years ago, was to, set up our own booth and sell directly to our fans, because then they can get an autograph. Right. We can meet with them. We get feedback as a writer, as a creator, to know what resonates and doesn't resonate with the audience is amazing feedback that, it's one thing if you're seeing an online review where people are, liking or hating something, but it's a different thing when you're meeting someone who's actually saying, I love this, or this is what I wish I could find. And as a creator, we really respond to that. And having that honest, genuine feedback from our audience is something that you don't get in any other medium. So being able to connect with the fans, both through, crowdfunding like Kickstarter, or being out there with the fans at live events like San Diego Comic-Con or LA Comic-Con, those are really rare things that as creators we really value. And we're trying to find a new ecosystem, and saying we don't need traditional distribution necessarily. Maybe we can directly connect with their audience and then, cater to their needs, and then we can monetize directly that way without having 10 middlemen.
It's funny, we're hearing that more and more.
Well, I think it's because we've been living with the direct sales market for such a long time in comics, and now it's showing cracks. I mean, the collapse of Diamond is a big deal. People who are just comic fans may not know just how big a deal that is, but when you start seeing delays on books, not like little indie books, but like books from Dynamite, books from Boom Studios, these are not. These are smaller companies, but they're not small companies, really. So when the cracks are showing like that, there definitely needs to be an alternative, and Kickstarter would be one of those alternatives. And
I think with them. Oh, sorry, Keith. I was just going to jump in, because with some of those companies is like, they are big companies in this small ecosystem, and it may take them a while to pivot. And that's one of the things me and Keith learned, is that, we don't know what tariffs are going to do for us. I mean, we have ideas and we're trying our best to kind of mitigate it. But like, one of the things specifically, like with this project we were doing, is like, the book's done. We're basically funding for printing. Like, we're basically already kind of in that stage of like proof of concept, getting it on the boats. Like, we're ahead of the game to hopefully try and mitigate as much as possible the tariffs, the shipping delays, all those things, because it is what it is. It's a real thing we have to consider at all phases, just because it might be this at one time, in a month, 2 months, whatever it may be, it might be completely different. And so we're always trying to be in communication with our printers or things like that, where it's like, how do we, as someone who's new in this space, do something a little different? It's like, well, instead of it being 6 months or a year down the road, which I know some people do, like, we're going to try and be ready by summer. So we launched in March, and we're fingers crossed hoping for July and August to be ready out in the world. You know what I mean? And we're trying to give back to those, like, for people who are international backers, like the tariffs, it sucks for them because the tariffs may not affect them, but how can we kind of help them kind of, mitigate that shipping cost, because someone who wants a book in Australia or Germany, it may cost them $100 to ship. So it's like one of the things we took into consideration is like, how do we do that? So it's like Keith and Christopher are gonna, sign books and be like, hey, like hopefully we can add more value, kind of give you like a white glove service, if you will, to these things where it's like, we know we're small and we know that it's gonna, it's a trust kind of exercise in the first one to go through. So it's like, hey, we're gonna try our best to be transparent, communicate, and give you the best experience. Because at the end of the day, I think what's really resonating more and more these days is like you said, people love the beautifully handcrafted book where it feels like it has been tailor made by someone or some team, where it feels like, hey, this isn't kind of just like a slap a label on it, print it out. Like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes we all read comics and you're like, what is this? Or why was this made? Like, who is this servicing? And at least for this project in particular, it's like, hey, we want to service the horror, psychological people who love this kind of thing, and hopefully give them a big, beautiful coffee table book. And we're going to try our best to get it to you in a timely manner. But again, things happen and we're just going to do our best. And so that's kind of like our mission statement, if we have one, is just like to try and do things honestly and quickly and efficiently.
That's good.
I don't want to speak for you, Keith.
No, that's exactly it. And so I think that, that's why the digital rewards are really interesting, because we have, especially with our business, we have the ability to kind of give back on a much higher level. So between behind the scenes, meeting us, meet and greets, virtual tours, we're doing mentorship classes. And we had a number of people on the campaign that actually really were excited about that. And so now we have people that we're going to be over the summer seeing how we did Frost Road and how our business works. We have some people coming in for personal tours of the studio here in Los Angeles. And we've got some of them who are doing artist portfolio reviews. So they're sitting down with Christopher Schei and with Trevor Goring to talk about, up and coming artists and how to not only look at their work, but how they got started in the industry and finding other access where you don't get that extended education. It's not like it's going back to school, but how do you connect with industry professionals other than meeting them at Comic-Con or seeing somebody, in public? Like, you don't really get the chance on social media to connect and get a real tangible one-on-one. How did you do that? Right. And so we figured that, with 25, 30 years in the business, with all of us having all of this background in big franchises, hopefully there's going to be other creators we can give back to the community, not just the fans, but we're fans ourselves. So we would love to learn from our idols and heroes, and not saying that we're necessarily everyone's hero, but we're doing a lot of work and people know our work maybe from our game work, and saying how we're transitioning into, comic books and graphic novels.
Now, just to back up into comics a little bit, you talk about being fans of comics. Do you each have sort of like, we always ask people, creators,
we like your comic book journey. So how did you get where you are now?
We talk about like, what was the comic that kind of either made a fan out of you, or the one that you looked at and you were like, I think I could do this. Like,
Chris, you start on this one. I'm talking a lot, but I'll follow you.
So I think for me, it wasn't a comic. It was kind of just the IP in general. So like, I'm a 90s kid, and like, I loved, seeing what, like, being introduced into what, Batman Returns, the TMNT movies, kind of be like, what is this? And then my uncle being like, oh, it's a comic. It's based off a comic book. And then I think my uncle gave me the Nightfall series. I think that was probably my first like full run where, Bane breaks Batman's back. Yeah. And then I just kind of never left. I mean, I kind of dipped out in high school, as some people kind of do, you're like, whether it's sports or girls or whatever it may be.
Usually
and
girls.
Then, usually, but, to each their own. Yeah. And then so I kind of got back into it around the New 52 Marvel Now era. I mean, Jeff Johns' Aquaman was my huge thing. That was kind of like my, like, this is a fun Indiana Jones type romp. You know what I mean? I absolutely loved it. And then Jason Aaron's Thor, especially with Jane, I absolutely adored, because my mom went through something similar to her journey. So I think around that time, and then if I had to give you more of like an indie book, because I know we're more collectors, so I can go a little more niche, Klaus from Boom. I read that every year for the holidays.
The one that Grant Morrison wrote, that, right?
Yep. Grant Morrison and Dan Mora. And then when they did the Omnibus Kickstarter, because I had all the original copies, and then when they bought that, I instantly jumped on that. Tokyo Ghost by Rick Remender and Sean Gordon Murphy.
That's a great story.
That's a close one to my heart.
Yeah.
So those are kind of like my Mount Rushmore. If I had to give you like a very quick one, and then I think Lord Baltimore from Mike Mignola. I know he's Hellboy, but a hot take. I prefer his Lord Baltimore over his Hellboy. But
those are good stories too. Yeah. Did you read Lobster Johnson?
Yeah, of course. I read all of them. But I
love Lobster Johnson.
Yeah, he's great. I think the romantic in me loves the whole like Lord Baltimore having to kill his wife and then seeking vengeance on the thing. And that's not a spoiler. That's the whole setup for the book.
Story.
But, yeah. So, but
those are great stories.
Yeah.
And Keith, what about you?
Mine's a much simpler list. Sorry. I had gotten involved in sci-fi and genre and horror stuff at a young age, especially on films. And so I was always inspired by those worlds. But when I first started, it was always Heavy Metal magazine. Like I used to read Heavy Metal and just all the different stories and the artists, and especially like the international artists where it wasn't just the traditional art, but you see these things that are fully painted and starting to get really, just on a whole nother level. And in the book that really did, there was one in particular, and it was Arkham Asylum, Grant Morrison and Dave McKean when they did that, and Serious House on Serious Earth, I think is with but it was that one, and everything was painted, right? And the take on Batman and the take on the Joker and just the violence and the grittiness and the painterly element of that. And that just stuck for me. That was what I really envisioned for a graphic novel. It's not just the cover, but every panel was painted. And so when I did Ascend, that was like kind of my bar. I was like, we're going to do this. Yeah. Every page is going to be like that. And I kind of use that. And I love, there's different styles. I'm working with some really amazing artists on some future projects right now. But that elevated aesthetic, that cinematic element to it, combined with the painterly element, is a big part of it. And that's why you see in Frost Road, it's very much a grounding element. What Christopher Schei did is we brought in a number of big actors, like people like Yuri Lowenthal and Chris Gialix, Edo Ross, all guys who have been in big movies and video games and other things, but able to sort of act through the scenes. And even though we already had the book sort of storyboarded for the film and the script was written, this way we could actually capture some of that action and motion and the poses. And then Christopher could use that as painting reference when he was painting the pages. And as a result, you get this photorealistic and ethereal sort of surreal look to the book. And to me, that was like an expansion of what we did in Ascend and some of the new projects we're doing. This is kind of a great blend of being able to take the photoreal and the painterly element.
It doesn't look like a comic book or a graphic. It actually looks like photographs that you've painted like,
almost like rotoscoping.
Amazing looking. The art the samples that we received are unbelievable looking.
Super strong stuff. And Christopher and it's interesting to look at his posters that he's doing now, and he's gotten a whole fan base just because he's taken classic movies like The Thing or The Fog or The Mist or all these movies that have been around since the 80s and 90s and repainting like these poster images, and they're just stunning. So I'm just a big fan of Christopher's work, and I think that getting to play in these worlds and create these stories and then collaborating with an artist that can bring that vision to life is just such an impressive opportunity for anyone to get to play in that playground.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Arkham Asylum. That was a big deal for me when I was about, I guess, how old was I when that came out? I must have been about 15, 16, 52. It was about 15, 16 when that came out, maybe. And just remember how uncomfortable that book made me. But it was so effective in its communicating like this sort of madness, that the whole place being like a head that was haunted, or like it was such a strange.
And for him to get pulled into that world and psychologically have Batman lose track of reality and the fact that he's actually inflicting pain to be able to like get back out of that. I thought that was just a brilliant way to be able to personify that, and using a graphic novel to do that was just really strong.
Oh yeah, that's the scene where he drives the glass shard through the middle of his hand.
Yeah.
That was definitely a leap ahead of anything I had read.
And to have Batman and horror and that element, like that's why for me it really stuck. I was just very same kind of thing, very very strong impression. And I was like, that's where I want to be as a creator.
Yeah. All right. So now, what about horror influences? Since we're talking horror here, what do you think are your influences for horror? For horror stories?
For me, a lot of people know this story because I had grown up, I'd seen Star Wars as a kid and loved sci-fi. My dad was a big sci-fi fan, and we always loved stuff and reading Dune and all these big like sci-fi epics. So there's this little movie that comes along called Alien, and it's coming to the theater in 70 millimeter, and back when theaters were huge, right, the IMAX size. And I'm 10 years old, and I'm like, and I go to my parents and I'm like, I love sci-fi, I love this kind of stuff. My parents are like, yeah, I don't think this is quite really a kid's movie. And I'm like, I love horror stuff. I love scary stuff. And I realized I was so emotionally ill-equipped to handle that movie because it's not overly bloody. I mean, sure, like the chest burster and other scenes like that are horrific, but it's more of a stalker film the way that Halloween and other films are. It's a slow burn, and it's what you don't see that terrifies you, right? The idea that alien is there and you know it's there and you get glimpses of it. And your mind, I think, is infinitely scarier than anything that you can see. Your brain is going to fill in anything that's there. So I just, the funny story of this one was that I'd seen it, like not a matinee, but something during the day, and the theater wasn't very crowded, but there was a family in front of it, a couple in front of us, and I'm there with my dad, with my folks, I think, and I'm 10 years old, and the chest burster scene happens in Alien, and at 10 years old, you've never seen violence. Even to this day, I think that scene holds up, but you've never seen violence that graphic, right? Even the cast, I don't think, was prepared for what was going to happen. I don't think they told everyone. They knew something was going to happen, but they didn't know that was going to happen. And they definitely know that they're going to get sprayed with blood and other things. And at 10 years old, to experience that, the visceral nature of that scene, I just didn't have the emotional vocabulary to express how terrified I was. So all I could do was laugh. And this creepy 10-year-old at the back of the theater laughing. I'm sure this couple is like, what the hell is with this kid? But like, I just remember in the theater going like, I couldn't even get it out, like how scared I was. And to this day, I will still have the occasional nightmare from that series. And now Alien Earth, I'm seeing the trailers. I'm like, oh my God, I got to go see this because I'm scary. It looks good. And Romulus was a great return to that world, which was great. And so I grew up in that kind of culture. So then it became The Shining and Halloween, and The Thing was huge influence.
One of our favorites.
Unbelievable. And I'm friends with a lot of the cast of that now. And in fact, Keith David just called me a few hours ago from a horse in Oklahoma, and he's telling me a story. And I'm like, I'm so privileged to like have lived in this space where I grew up with these films and now have become friends with the filmmakers and the cast and the people in that. And so it's hard to kind of differentiate your creative side from your fan side. And so that's kind of what I always wanted to do as a creator, is give that back, to be accessible to our fans and our audience, just to not to flex and be like, sort of like someone that's sort of boasting about what they're doing. It's more like, hey, we've been through history together, and these are the cultural references we all grew up with. And to be part of that and share that and help the next generation grow is part of, I think, our legacy of how we want to give back to our community.
That's great. And Chris, what about you? You remember sort of the first thing that may have interested you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think obviously Keith said John Carpenter, we can all kind of agree, the Halloween and The Thing. But at the same time, I'm also like the Jeff Goldblum effect, because like as a kid growing up, Jurassic Park scared the hell out of me.
Yes.
Because you couldn't wrap your head around it, because it's the first time you're seeing dinosaurs for real, or, CGI wise. But then I think for the most like pound for pound horror thing that I loved as a kid or grew up in was The Fly with Jeff Goldblum.
Oh, yeah.
I think that the best like Greek tragedy told in a modern or 80s aesthetic.
It's
so
heartbreaking.
It's you get so wrapped up into it because you don't want him to die, but at the same thing you do want him to die because he's an asshole. But at the same time you just realize you're just like, man, this is amazing. And then I think for me also, like, I've always been kind of inspired by the things that are adjacent to it because I've been in a world of IP for so long. So I think a lot of things like shock rock, I've kind of realized, but teams like Kiss and like the horror scene of things like that, or like Rob Zombie, or things that kind of Ice Nine Kills that inspires it a little bit. Everything that's kind of like tangentially associated with it. And then if I had to give more. Gwar, yes, they're great, and then and all the phallic things they do on stage.
They're coming around again. 40th anniversary. They're coming around.
They're amazing. And then also like when it comes to like comics and horror, like James Tynion, his Justice League Dark, his Something is Killing the Children, and I mean Colin Bunn. You know, I can kind of go on and on, but I think for us, like horror is definitely like in our blood because it's that one thing that everyone can relate on. We all know what it's like to be scared, obviously, and you know how that affects us and what we do see and what we don't see and how it affects our senses. And I think it's just one of those things where you can always come back to it, and generally speaking, you can scare people, and whether that's you playing a trick on a loved one and they hate you for it because you're like, oh damn you, like why'd you do that, you know, or whatever it is that you buying an e-ticket, you know, it's something you can have a laugh at.
Right. It's funny. I
Here it comes. Here comes your alien story, because I was waiting, because it was exactly like Keith's alien story. He literally told your story.
Right, but I had seen something that scared me worse, so I was already inoculated when I saw Alien.
Okay.
I saw Alien on HBO when it first came out. My parents let me watch it. My parents were very, very liberal about letting me watch stuff that I definitely should not have been watching.
Yeah, no.
Like they took me to see Blade Runner when I was little because Harrison Ford was in it.
Right.
That was not a movie. Here. That was not a movie for a kid.
No, just to see like, I mean, someone getting their eyes like crushed their skull, and that's like, oh my God, amazing.
What it inoculated me was there was a 1979 2-night miniseries of Salem's Lot.
Oh yeah,
starring David Soul.
Yeah,
from Starsky and Hutch. And I watched that. And 79, I would have been.
You would have been 7.
I would have been 7 years old. Yeah, and I think it was my aunt who was babysitting me who let me watch that. And forget it. That was, to this day, I still have trouble thinking about scenes in that movie without being afraid.
And I think that. I mean, to get philosophical for a second, it's childhood trauma that we all take with us the rest of our lives, right? Yes. And sometimes that's, you know, unfortunately that's, you know, it's family circumstances or abuse that happens, but what happens to us as kids stays with us our whole life.
Absolutely.
And PTSD, and the idea is it's sort of like when you go through trauma, depending on your threshold of trauma, like you said, you were kind of desensitized by the time you saw Alien, right? Yeah. So you were like traumatized by one, and that stuck with you. The rest from there, you're like, okay, I've seen it, right? Yeah. And working in games like, you know, Call of Duty and all these like military games, I've worked with a lot of like military guys who have gone through some just terrible circumstances, and the PTSD that happens, it's like your threshold of what you experience is so much different as a soldier per se than a civilian, right? That's why something terrible happens, you know, domestically versus in war, people are traumatized, right? And that PTSD lasts. And meeting soldiers from World War II and other conflicts and seeing what they've gone through and how it sticks with them, right? And for us, you know, growing up in a relative era of peace, you know, compared to other generations or other countries, we're traumatized by the entertainment that we've been subjected to at 10 years old. And to see Salem's Lot or Alien or The Thing and other things, like I did the mistake of showing my daughter Killer Clowns from Outer Space, thinking, oh, I'm a good dad. My daughter loves horror stuff. It's Killer Clowns. It's funny. And holy crap, I completely, to this day, she still blames me for having a clown phobia. Because I'm like, oh wow, sorry, that wasn't really appropriate, was it?
Have you ever seen the movie The Descent?
Yes, with the women going into the
spelunking.
Oh, terrifying! Yeah.
Okay, I saw somebody wrote online. This just reminded me of what you just said, saying that he was watching scary movies with his kid, his daughter or something, and she kept complaining that they weren't scary enough. So he showed her The Descent, and he goes, and there's not a lot of times you know that you screw up as a parent, but boy, was this one of them.
Yeah, that one's generational. Yeah. No, that there's a not a documentary, but my wife sent this to me because that story of me going to see Alien. Yeah. There's a news clip, and you can find it online because she just found it recently. And it's this news crew interviewing families with their 10-year-old kids coming out of the theater saying, "This is a very scary film," and asking the parents like, "What did you think?" And the kids are like, yeah, and you see it's that same PTSD, that soldier with that 50-yard stare going, yeah, I don't think I should have seen that movie. Like, no. And like, you see the regret.
And that's George Lucas's fault.
That was a trick.
Because Star Wars was 2 years before, so everyone was like, oh, science fiction.
Let's go see another Alien movie. Yay. It's funny you say Killer Clowns. My 23-year-old, I had her watching horror movies when she was very, very, very young, and it is what it is. She just watched She just watched Killer Clowns last week for the first time because now she's going back to watch the movies I didn't show her when she was little. That it was a little bit too much for her when she was a kid, and now she's rewatching them.
Well, so there's an interesting moral to the story because my daughter's same age, and once she had a taste for horror, and because she has access to the internet and other things, she starts watching all this terrible horror, right? And not to be judgmental, I mean, not saying my movie is anything better than any of that anyway, but like I'm watching the stuff she's watching, and it's all derivative stuff of classics, right? And not very well done in some cases, but it's an homage to something, or they're poking fun of something. And what I was seeing is that even in this generation of films, you'll see in the new, in the last It movie, right? There's a head that sprouts all of the spider leg things, and he goes, "Oh, you got to be fucking kidding me!"
Yeah.
Like, and direct quote, direct homage to the thing. Yeah. We all know it, and a lot of kids are like, "Oh, that's scary," and they just have no idea what that reference is, right? Well, my daughter had started to go down this path of seeing movies where they were referencing things, not even just bad movies, but just a lot of references where she didn't realize it was a derivative of that. Right. So here in Los Angeles, up until COVID, we had the ArcLight theaters, and ArcLight was like the best of the best. You could reserve seats, great sound, great picture. Everything was just an excellent experience. So I got her like best row seats right in the middle, right center of a remastered version of John Carpenter's The Thing. Wow. And we sat there and just watched it with no distractions, no phone, no internet, nothing, just watching it perfectly remastered.
Yeah, we went and saw it also. Yeah. The remastered version, it was where I took my daughter, and I was like, we have to see this, and it's one of my favorite horror movies.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was like, we have to see this in the theater.
Exactly. And that was the conversation. And what was wild is that it was the best, because I still remember my daughter sitting next to me, everyone's, leaving after the movie, and she looks at me and she goes, "Dad, I get it. I understand now why you wanted me to see this," because foundationally, that movie is everything, right? It's got the horror, it's got the visual effects, it's got the pacing, it's got all the isolation elements, all the things that are great storytelling, but also great movie making. And I've been fortunate enough because I know a lot of the cast. I hear a lot of the horror stories of making the film and going through what they did. But it was interesting to see my daughter see it just purely for the entertainment side, because then she went back and she watched the Shining, which I wouldn't let her see as a child, because psychologically it was on a whole nother level. Violence wise, moderate, but psychologically really devastating, right? But then she went back and saw American Werewolf in London, and she went back and saw all of the classics leading up to this. So now when she sees a film, she now understands how it was intended. Stanley Kubrick never intended his movies to be seen on an iPhone or an iPad. Right. They were designed for a 40-foot screen, because the pacing and the cinematography as a filmmaker was designed for that. But she could now identify the cultural references and other things. So, for example, in last year's Black Mirror, when they had like the werewolf episodes there, it was directly an homage to American Werewolf in London, and it was fun because even the music and the way they did the prosthetics and other things was all sort of paying an homage back to that. And I think it's nice to see a younger generation that maybe didn't grow up with those films or even seen those films to understand the heritage of horror and what we were all influenced by, and hopefully we can traumatize their kids as grandkids.
My daughter's been doing the same thing, and the reason why I do it is because I'm getting older and I forget the connections, and she remembers them now, and she goes, "Dad, that's just like that movie. Don't you remember?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I remember now." He's my memory now. And it's funny you say The Thing, and our first interview ever that we ever did since we've started, we were a podcast first, now we're on our channel, was Thomas Waits, and the reason why we had him on was because we loved him in The Thing and The Warriors. He was when he said yes to us, it was the first time it legitimized what we were doing, because it was like, oh my God, Thomas Waits is going to sit and talk to us. What? How did we do that?
He was nice.
He cursed a hell of a lot, but he was a great guy.
Speaking of the heritage of horror, have you gone back at all to look at some of the old horror comics since you're, doing a horror comic? Did you look back at anything? Is there anything that you looked at as a reference point? Like 30 Days of Night or even older, you look at Creepy or Eerie
stuff, any of the
EC stuff? Are you familiar with any of that?
For me, I'm gonna just be honest, say no, because I have I'm so tied to modern comics, and I know sometimes the execution is just different in older comics. And again, nothing wrong with it in any way, but I know for me, like I'm such a like ride or die, Tynan, Bunn, kind of Kirkman, kind of McFarlane type guy. Like for just in full, like my comic horror taste is probably goes as far back as McFarlane, because just maybe that's just my age demographic or things like that. But for me, I'm more of just like maybe Snyder, Scott Snyder as well. But I think my horror taste in comics is just more modern, if anything. So
I always forget. It's funny you said Snyder, and I always forget that he used to do horror more often. He
wrote American Vampire with Stephen King.
American Vampire, right? And he also did that series Witches, which
is on Amazon
volume, and I never got past the first one. I should go back and read that. That was a good story. Yeah, and he has some great one called Night of the Ghoul that I've heard great things, but I haven't checked it out yet.
Yeah, it's definitely a throwback to horror filmmaking, and I think 21 Laps. It got announced on Reporter last year that they're adapting it into a feature or a show or anything. But yeah, I know we were talking mostly about old horror, but I have a question for new horror.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen or have any thoughts on the Terrifier series and what he's done?
Hold on.
This is so strange you bring that up, because
they are very good friends of mine. So
really?
The guys who make those movies are from Staten Island.
Yeah.
So Fuzz on the Lens has been the producers. I don't know how well you know the movie. The Levy brothers are the producers of the last two. They're close friends of ours. His wife, I work with his wife, and my wife taught him, and we've gone to a number of their premieres. They just did a movie called Stream.
Okay.
We went to the premiere and met everybody there, and we've been friends with them for 10, 15 years. So yes.
Amazing.
Yes, I know those movies very well.
Okay.
You're a big fan of the movies?
I do enjoy. The funny thing is that I always had heard things, because like this clown, this like DIY, clown horror. And I was like, okay, cool. But then, like I said about being kind of tied into things, I got into it because of the Ice Nine Kills band, because they're like, oh, my favorite bands are doing a music video, and they actually have art. So then once I kind of gave it this chance, and I was like, I kind of did all three in a row, and I was just like, what the hell am I watching? Especially that third one.
It's tough, and the best way to tell you who the person that's friend of ours is, in the first movie, the janitor, he cuts his head off.
Yeah.
That's our friend Michael, and Michael has that head above his bed.
Oh, that's awesome.
Brad.
Yeah, he has his own severed head.
He has his own severed head above his bed, where his kids are, and he has just had two little kids. He just started his family, and yes, we know the Terrifier movies very well. My daughter actually is trying to get into movies. She worked on their last movie with them, Stream, so very good friend of ours.
I have watched a lot of horror in my life, a lot, and I got to tell you, one of the kills in the first Terrifier movie actually made me turn the movie off, and I have to come back to this. I don't think I can.
Which one?
We had the girl upside down.
Oh, that when he down. Yeah. Oh God!
As soon as he started, I was like, I got to stop. I can't.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't know why that affected me so badly, but it did. It got to me, and I was like, I can't.
You know what's interesting is that gore porn has a place, and I respect it. Sure. But you have to like kind of emotionally be connected to the characters. And one of the things that got me in recent years that had that same visceral reaction was in The Walking Dead, right? When they kill off Glenn.
Yeah.
And because that scene in particular, and the series, had its ups and downs. And I'm really good friends with Michael Cudlitz, who also gets killed in that scene, who doesn't get enough credit for his kill because Glenn gets all the
so bad.
Yeah, and it's so bad because it's like, okay, I get it, and what you don't see, I always feel is obviously, as important as what you do see, but you see everything there, and then it keeps going and going and going and go, and I just turned it off, and I actually stopped watching the series after that for quite a while because it just was like, it kind of turned me off so much, and that's the weird thing of someone who loves horror so much, and as a writer, as a creator, and having worked with both of those actors extensively, I don't know. There was a personal connection there that kind of took me out of it a little bit. And I kind of feel that there is a point where it's like the blood only means so much until you're connected to the cast, and to kill off an important character, much less two, is really devastating for a viewer. And so sometimes it gets excessive, right?
Oh yeah,
that's a hard thing.
My oldest kid never forgave The Walking Dead for that.
Yeah,
Never forgave for Glenn's death. Never.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's iconic, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there are moments in movies where people get killed off, and like, you know, Game of Thrones is known for that. I remember my wife reading the books, and she's reading next to me, and she's reading through the book, and she goes, and she starts flipping back pages. I'm like, what are you doing? And she goes, I don't understand. They just the lead character just died.
Yeah,
and I'm like I had a third way through the book, and I'm like, maybe it's a dream sequence, and she's like, no, like. So I get it. I mean, the idea of shock horror and be able to do that and not be grounded. And I think that's where Walking Dead kind of always found its ground, is that you could kill off a character and realize you're not attached to any one character. And you know, Game of Thrones, other shows did that. And I think that there's some positive aspects to that. I guess
I don't know about that.
The audience shifting, but I kind of feel like you're on a journey with the characters, and it's better to kind of, if it is going to happen, then make that emotional weight a sacrifice or something that's there. But when it's just death for a kill's sake, that's
the thing with those Terrifying movies, and they are good friends of ours, and we have been invited to premieres. I will not watch them. They're too much for me personally. I love horror movies. I love the idea of being scared from a horror movie. I don't like gore for gore's sake.
And I think also, I feel like I've become less desensitized than I used to be. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm getting older.
No, 100%. As we get older, it gets worse.
Thanks.
Death is knocking at your door.
Thank you. Yeah, but I rewatched recently, and I don't know if either of you have had an experience with this. I recently rewatched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the first one. The first one. In a long time. Yeah. And I got to tell you, it bothered me so much more than the first time I saw it as a teenager. Like, it really made me terribly nervous the entire time. Yeah. Even though I'd already seen it. And there's something about the sound design in that movie. I don't know exactly what they did, but I'd have to watch it a couple more times maybe to figure out what they were doing. That just... I don't know if you've ever been to the Zach Baggins. Yeah, Zach Baggins has a museum in Las Vegas, and wherever you think about him as a host is one thing, but the museum of the artifacts he's collected is pretty impressive. Oh yeah, and he's got a whole Ed Gein room and all the stuff that was based on, and to be that close to actual physical skin and other things like you realize like this is where the bodies were cooked, and this is where they do, and you're in the room with it. It's the actual artifacts, and like you said, as you get a little bit older, not even just close to death, but the idea that like when you're young and dumb, it's like, oh yeah, I mean that's why it's easy to recruit a kid to go to war. But like, man, it's like I tell you, I've watched Apocalypse Now at 3 different stages of my life, and I probably have to go back now, but I remember as a teenager watching that movie, having a much different experience watching that as a 20-some-year-old who, you know, could have, you know, it's one thing when you're seeing blood and guts and it's, oh my God. And then the next thing is like, oh, wow, I could be that kid. And the next part is like, I could be Marlon Brando. And I think it's sort of like, wow, you can relate to the characters just by seeing the same piece of work at a different point in your life of what that means. And so I agree, like, yeah, the gore and that kind of stuff. I mean, we've all seen it, and God knows I've been through it personally with all the accidents and things that I've been through in my life. So, like, I think the blood only means so much unless you're grounded to the characters and where it is.
With meaning behind it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Don't we all always start as Robin, become Batman, and then end up as Alfred? We're vicious cycle of life.
or you end up as the Joker. Or whatever villain of your choosing.
Oh boy.
Because I also think it's a testament, just to kind of like circle back, is like the whole like it's imperfectly perfect, because it's just they did it because they had such small budget, and it's a testament of actually doing the thing on set and having it within the frame, you know?
Oh yeah, no.
Because now everything
amazing.
Everything can be like, you know, imposed now, right? Oh, we'll just add it digitally, and it's just never the same.
No.
And it's like, oh, we'll just add more money into it. And now like, go ahead.
Well, there's an interesting thing though, but go back into the 80s to dive into the 80s and 90s, right? So you look at David Cronenberg and some of these low budget films like Scanners, like I'm really good friends with like Michael Ironside, right? And his classics.
I love Michael Ironside. Oh, God,
right. And like doing this, or you look at Videodrome, right? Yeah. Horrific practical effects, but psychologically so much worse. Yes. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think even though those were super low budget films, they were so creative in their use of practical effects and horror and other things, because you're kind of viscerally going through what it is. So even though the blood is an aspect of it, it's more the distortion, or even the reason why I think Alien was such a horrific concept for its time. And now is it's, from a male perspective of being raped or giving birth or gestating from inside, right? Like that's such a foreign thing to be scared of, that, that women have been doing since the age of time. And I think men sort of look at this going, oh my God, like the horror of that. And my wife's like, yeah, get used to it. So, I think it's a different era now, because some of that old 80s, 90s mentality of some of those like low budget horror films are now coming back around. And, Terrifier is very much an homage to some of these early films.
And the money Terrifier made is just going to inspire more, because they made on a no budget. They made like
90
15 million on the second one, and the third one was a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah.
The third one was the top movie that weekend it was released.
And they have more content. They just released. They're the ones who did Steamboat Willie, so it's the same guys who released that, and they have a bunch of other things coming out in there.
It's gonna do what Carpenter's Halloween did, where it took the slasher.
Well, and what's interesting is that it's also what Paranormal Activity did, right? So if you think about it, Paranormal is done for like 50,000, and Jason and team puts in a few $100,000 to bolster it up, and had great concept to it, but got a theatrical release right alongside a big blockbuster movie. So if you have a movie that's $250,000 versus a movie that's 25, 50, $100 million, they're both in 2 theaters. And so someone who wants to take their significant other to get scares and cuddles during a horror film versus someone who's going to see a romantic comedy, it's like, hey, so the box office is going to take off and that's why horror has traditionally always done well, especially theatrically, which I think is kind of a really neat evergreen.
And it also seems to be making a decent comeback in comics right now, because they're what company is doing the EC line now?
Is it IDW or is it Oni?
It might be IDW. It might be one of those. I can't remember who it was. But they brought back Tales from the Crypt. They brought back what's the other one they're doing? Cruel Universe, which is like more sci-fi oriented horror, and they have a fantasy one that's out now too, I think. And so it seems to be making a big comeback in not just in general. Film.
Horror is
but horror is really
in comic books right now.
Some of
the best stuff out.
Something's in the air that's bringing it all back.
I mean, I think also with Tynan doing the Tiny Onion, and then the Exquisite Corpses, and then kind of all the things he kind of has his tenderloins in. It's just he is kind of like the all father of horror, I should say, because he is really pushing that narrative and really driving in, especially with queer representation and just new ideas, fun ideas. I mean, the trading card in a polybag, like he's getting now card gamers into it. So it's like just thinking of those fun ways to do horror. I think that's what it speaks to. For sure.
Psychological horror works as well.
Definitely.
Because
where can people go to get Frost Road
when it's ready, when it's available, and when do you expect it to be out? And
so the best way to do it right now is that if you're listening to this, and if it's within probably the May timeframe, we're going to leave late pledges open for at least the next couple of weeks. We're going to start doing collections and things like that, and we're working with Kickstarter directly to do the pledge collection this time to try something new. But hopefully within the next month we'll leave it open to kind of just let people know about it, since it's funded now and it's going to be coming out. Our projected goal is July/August. We're hoping for San Diego Comic-Con, again, minding tariffs and shipping delays and all that. Our goal is to be around San Diego Comic-Con, because once we to kind of tease the future, so to speak, is that we're going to be at San Diego Comic-Con, and the first half of the con, Thursday and Friday, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're going to be kind of celebrating, the finishing of Frost, getting people their stuff and all those things, and then on that night we're going to be flipping it. And hopefully Comic-Con doesn't get mad at us. And we're going to be then announcing our next Kickstarter. That's going to be the entire fall. So to answer your question, on Kickstarter right now, And then if we have any additional stock, because I think we're going to try and order about 10% more just to make sure there's no if there's any damages or things get lost, but if there's any additional stock, we'll have them either at conventions or at our website, or if we're able to, secure. If for this version, let me preface, this specific coffee table acrylic version will only be available on the Kickstarter, and then any overstock at conventions, because hopefully the plan is to get make it maybe a distribution announcement of sorts down the road, and then if that gets picked up, it'll hopefully like a mass produced version will be out, but this hardcover one will be only through this Kickstarter.
So we'll be at booth 4039 off the E entrance, which is the main center entrance at San Diego Comic-Con. So for anyone who's been there, the PCB booth is going to be pretty much dedicated for Frost. And then, as Chris was saying, Saturday, Sunday, it's going to be kind of a big transformation. And what we really want to do is what we learned as this first Kickstarter, even though we had done the Exiled and some other stuff as successful Kickstarters, this was really the first experiment for us to really kind of test the waters of what we can do and connect with our audience. So what we're going to announce at San Diego Comic-Con is going to kick off a 6-month tour, so to speak, of what's going to happen. It's going to be a very different campaign. It'll still be for fans within the horror community, much different aesthetic and a much different kind of production. So I think people are going to be very surprised that they're going to kind of see that coming out of that. So for those people who want to join us, it'll be starting Saturday morning of San Diego Comic-Con.
What other conventions you have planned besides San Diego?
We've got a 12-city tour. So we're going to be at LA Comic-Con. We'll be at Long Beach Comic-Con. We'll be at Midsummer Scream. We're talking about hopefully coming out to Silver Scream, and we'll be at Crew of Boo. We're participating in some big citywide events. We just got confirmation on a big one today. So there are going to be some live big sort of parade events that we're going to be at. So next year, the tour is going to be very interesting. It's going to be different for most creators than what you've seen. And it's going to have a very live, immersive, experiential aspect to it. So there'll be a whole tour related to it, kind of digging back to what I did in the music days, but kind of on a whole new level.
Ooh, nice. New York Comic-Con?
New York Comic-Con, we desperately want to come out to. It's a harder trip for us because of our setup and bringing it out there. But we do have stuff in New Orleans and Massachusetts that they're asking us to come out. So if the tour can go out that way, we really want to go back to New York. I haven't done New York in about 10 years, but Wesley Snipes is out there. And so we've got new stuff with the Exiled coming out. So we're going to hopefully, even if we can't have a whole booth, we might just make some appearances there while we're there.
Oh, that's awesome. We'll be there. So that's
awesome.
Oh, yeah. We'll be at New York. I go every year.
Nice.
I go sporadically.
He goes when he can survive, because he almost died the last time he went because it was just too much for him.
You say that like I was
like I've said, death is knocking. It's close.
You say that I was fainting like a Victorian woman. It was very stressful. Let's put it that way. I don't know if you've been to New York. You've been there before.
Yeah, it's intense.
It's so much more intense now than it used to be.
So much more intense.
So much more.
Especially that secondary floor where it's everyone, like the artist alley area. That's it's a giant maze.
Yes. Yeah. And you're on your feet for 7 hours. Yeah. And you just
concrete. On concrete. It's not like you're on cushy padded floors. You're walking around like hard floors and everything. It's just it's very draining. It takes a couple of weeks to recover from
you're starving, you're dehydrated, you just spent $15 on a bag of M&Ms. It's insane.
I made you work. There's a whole bunch of other.
Yeah, I had to interview people, but we're looking forward to it. If you can get out to New York Comic-Con, we'd love to meet you in person.
Yeah,
we will. We are going to try very hard to make that trip.
That's great. So everyone out there, look for Frost Road
across.
Get online, find it. Yeah,
and listen, if you can, in your next project, we have been trying for months to get killed in a comic book. If you would like to use our images to kill. We just want to get killed one time.
People are going to start thinking we're morbid.
Okay.
You're talking about me dying. You want to get killed in a comic?
I want to get killed.
No. I think what we're working on right now is we can definitely find a way to put a panel in. You know what I mean?
Just kill us. That's all we want. All I want is to get killed as many ways as I possibly can.
Right.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. Talking about generational trauma for our kids, right? So
right. Yeah.
I just want my daughter to see me.
My kids are old enough; they're fine.
Who did we interview that time? Who did the whole book on that?
Oh man, the book was called blah blah blah.
And he wrote.
Dies.
He's a comic book writer, and he wrote an entire book.
He did comic strips about different ways he thought about dying.
That was a whole type.
So there's like one where he's walking on the street, he gets hit by a meteor, and like there's one where like it was very funny. It's all done like tongue in cheek, but he said it was his own way of getting over his anxiety about his mortality.
We all know where we're going at one point, so might as well put an ending on it and work backwards, right?
Yeah,
we sure do.
That's awesome.
I mean, it could be the Simpsons effect, right? He's like, "Hey, I called it." If he does,
right.
Yeah, die by getting hit by a car. There you go.
He's a Nosferatu.
Armageddon 2.
Thank you.
Well, listen, thank you for giving us your time like this. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it. Mm-hmm. And
thank you
for having us.
Yeah, listen, if you want to come back on when the next one, you're welcome back anytime. Just reach out. We'll have you on.
We'd love to. We'll send you guys some stuff, and then for anyone who wants to follow what we're doing on the original side, we have a website. It's pcb.cc, and on the gaming side of all of our projects we work for, it's pcbproductions.com. Okay. And so those two sites kind of have our original stuff and our client work there. And so we're going to be posting a lot of new stuff there. And then we'll send you some links, especially what's going to be coming out in July. So that'll be an exciting time to share.
Yeah, we'll put it on.
Let us know when we can put it on social media or talk about it on the
comments, and definitely.
Of course.
All right, great. Well,
thank you, gentlemen.
Hang out 1 second, all right? I'm going to stop recording.